Jimmy exited the elevator and proceeded to his office. Inside, Maggie Dawson, his boss, emerged from her office. "Jimmy, come in," she beckoned, motioning towards her desk. "Jimmy, we've been taken over, and I need to let you go," Maggie explained, passing him an envelope containing his final month's salary and mentioning they would send his belongings along with his P45. Shocked, Jimmy left the office and returned home. Sitting in his flat, he grappled with his sudden unemployment. He poured himself a drink from the cupboard, downing it quickly, then another, until he fell asleep on the sofa. Waking up in bed the next morning, he got up and showered. Afterwards, he turned on the TV and looked through the wardrobe, filled with women's clothing. Trying on a shoe that surprisingly fit, he noticed a news broadcast featuring a young man in a red skirt suit alongside an older woman in gray trousers. Jimmy turned up the volume as they discussed political meetings. Turning off the TV, he went downstairs to find the daily paper and some letters on the mat. After filling the kettle and sitting down with the paper, he perused an unusual men's section filled with recipes, diets, and exercises, alongside a sports section predominantly featuring women's sports, with only synchronized swimmers and cheerleaders of an American football team featuring men. The phone rang, and he quickly answered, "Hello? You're going to be late." "What are you doing?" the voice urgently said. "Who is this?" he asked. "It's Eddie. Get down here fast or Maggie will be even more upset with you," Eddie warned. "She's already angry. I got fired yesterday," he protested. "Quit messing around, Jimmy, or you'll be fired today," Eddie retorted before the call abruptly ended. "Damn," he muttered, rushing upstairs to dress as quickly as possible. Jimmy arrived at work 25 minutes later and headed to his floor, passing by the admin room. "Where are you off to?" a man with a name tag reading Eddie Taylor asked. "Sorry, Eddie," Jimmy replied, taking off his jacket as instructed and accepting a bundle of bound reports. "Take these down to the south room," Eddie instructed. "Tell Maggie you were delayed due to a problem with the binding machine." Jimmy knocked on the door marked South Room. "Come in," a woman's voice called. Entering, he found several women seated around a table. "What kept you, Jimmy?" the woman at the head of the table asked. "There was an issue with the binding machine," he explained. Jimmy realized the woman was Maggie, looking very different from the previous day. "Good, you can leave these here," Maggie said, taking the reports from him. "How was she?" Eddie asked later, sitting at his computer. "She was okay, didn't bite my head off, if that's what you mean," Jimmy replied. "She was pretty angry earlier," Eddie remarked. "Jimmy, can you take over here?" "I'm going to lunch with Barbara," Eddie said later on. "Sure. When will you be back?" Jimmy asked. "About 2 p.m., Eddie replied. "Have a good lunch," Jimmy said as Eddie left the admin office. The office was quiet as Jimmy glanced around. He came across a stack of photographs and sifted through them, discovering several featuring himself. One photo depicted him in a black strapless bikini, with Maggie standing behind him. He returned the photos to their place and checked for tasks, finding none. Exiting the office just past 5 p.m., he closed the door behind him, removed his jacket, and headed to the kitchen to prepare dinner. Afterward, he went upstairs, changed into shorts and a t-shirt, then returned downstairs to watch TV. An advertisement featuring a very attractive young man in a bikini caught his eye, prompting him to switch channels to Star Trek. The show featured women in major roles and men in short dresses and knee-length boots. After watching the rest of the episode, he tuned into the evening news before going to bed. The next morning, his alarm rang at 7:45 a.m. Getting out of bed, he opened the wardrobe and selected his attire, a tight red shift dress, accompanied by a jacket and red stiletto heels. Arriving early at work, he sorted and logged incoming mail before placing it on Maggie's desk. Eddie joined him a few minutes later. "You're in bright and early, Jimmy," remarked Eddie. "I thought I'd better make up for yesterday," Jimmy replied. "Tea or coffee?" Eddie offered. Tea, thanks Eddie, Jimmy accepted. Maggie arrived and entered her office. Jimmy knocked on her door. Come in, Maggie invited. Jimmy entered, carrying her coffee. Thanks, Jimmy, Maggie said warmly. Wow, you look great today. That's a really attractive dress and such a bright color. Thank you, Miss Davis, Jimmy responded gratefully, leaving her office with a wide smile. What are you smiling about? Eddie asked, finishing typing a letter. Maggie complimented me, Jimmy shared. What did she say? Eddie inquired. She said I looked nice and my dress was attractive, Jimmy recounted. Well, it is a very sexy dress, Eddie remarked. I wanted a change from the usual drab office uniform, Jimmy explained. Later, Jimmy walked into the cafeteria and noticed some women staring at him, which made him feel good. He sat down, but the other men gave him hostile looks, which only made him smile more.